Hi everyone, my name is Sasha Sood, and today I'm going to be presenting my Art as Social Action Creative Project for MAS 365. So let's get into it. Okay, so first I want to take a quick minute to go through what exactly I'm going to be talking about in this presentation and just kind of give you an overview. So first of all, I'm going to give you an introduction and kind of explain the route I went with this project. This was our final, and essentially there was a bunch of different ways that we could have chosen to present our information. So I'm going to explain the way I chose and kind of why. Second, I'm going to go over the layout of my project. So just kind of give you an overview of what it actually looks like. Third, I'm going to go through that layout and then actually explain exactly what I discuss in the project and kind of my main points. Then I'm going to close out and kind of give a finishing statement to sum everything up. And finally, I'm just going to wrap it up and show you my works cited. So awesome, let's start. So in terms of an introduction for my project, I wanted to take a minute and explain what exactly I chose to do. So for this project, I chose to present my information through an Instagram archive. So essentially, I went through and created an Instagram account and then created a feed of a bunch of different posts with images, tags, locations, and then all of them also had captions. And so kind of what I wanted for this project was for it to be a learning experience that was both interactive and something that was fun. So essentially what I did was I chose 3 different topics that we covered in class. They covered a bunch of different things, including youth justice and local justice initiatives, also just kind of learning about the struggles that the Latino, Latina, and Latinx and Chicano, Chicana, Chicanx communities face in Tucson. And so a lot of that talked about the Tucson civil rights era and just things like that. So the entirety of my presentation kind of hits different points that we learned about in class and also pushes for justice to continue. So I also wanted to take a minute to go over the layout of what the actual Instagram archive looks like. So as I mentioned, I went through and created a new Instagram account. And so I named it Art as a Social Action. I had my name in it and kind of gave a quick little bio because I wanted this to be an Instagram account that was public and something that people can potentially come across, even just as they're scrolling through Instagram. And it's something that's informative and positive, and I wanted it to have impact on the community that we're in, because within this post, within this feed, I tagged the location of Tucson and I tagged a bunch of different local initiatives and communities. And so this is something that is very interactive and something that the rest of the community can take a minute to look at. So I provided a quick bio to kind of give that feedback. And then in terms of the rest of the profile, I have 6 different posts that kind of give information about this course. And each of them have their own captions and multiple pictures, and it's very informative. So next, I kind of want to go through and actually explain what exactly I'm talking about in the archive and give some background on that. So I recorded a little screen recording going through the feed and showing what it would look like when someone who is looking at the page directly through Instagram would see. So this is just kind of what it looks like from the start, and then you would click on the first post, and the first post is kind of just an introduction to what the page is and kind of explaining that as well. And the second post talks about the ACLU, specifically the Arizona American Civil Liberties Union, and kind of in the caption, I talk more about the struggles that certain communities have faced in Arizona and in Tucson in specific. And I talk about the ACLU and how they've been helpful in terms of fighting for social justice. And then I move on to talk about different kind of social justice communities. This one is 2 young activists who kind of talk about getting young voices engaged, and their main goal is to kind of help the youth of Tucson realize that it's never too early to start learning about how they can be helpful. So I kind of highlight that and the resources there. And then I also move on to talk about Senate Bill 1070, excuse me, and just kind of how that bill, that Show Me Your Papers bill, was impactful in Arizona at the time it was signed into law, and how it's still impactful today, and just kind of the push that it has. And then I go on to talk about the Tucson civil rights era, as I mentioned, and just kind of heightened racism during that time period and discrimination, and how a lot of community members were targeted and kind of their experiences with that. I then move on to talk about TYLO, which is a grassroots organization in Tucson, and they specifically work fighting for social justice and getting community members involved with Tucson, but specifically they work with the environment and trying to specifically heighten the ways that Tucson itself can be proactive in terms of saving the climate. And then I go on to talk about Raquel Rubio Goldsmith, who is somebody that we talked about in our class. She was part of the University of Arizona, was a very prominent activist, and made a huge impact in terms of ethnic studies in Arizona. So I wanted to take a minute and highlight her as well. Yeah, and then I go on to talk more about the inclusion of ethnic studies and the pushback that a lot of lawmakers have had in terms of trying to ban the studies of not only Mexican American studies, but the ethnic studies department in general. And I talk about certain legislation that has been passed and how that has kind of impacted the community, and then certain protests and movements that have happened because of that. Oops. And then lastly, something I wanted to highlight was just the art in Tucson. As somebody who has just kind of moved here, I noticed that there was a lot of art around, and that takes form oftentimes in murals and things like that. And a lot of that art, highlights social justice. And the ones I picked specifically highlighted Indigenous voices. And so I touched on that a little bit as well. And something that I also wanted to touch on that I thought was really awesome was that the reason I made this Instagram post was, or this Instagram feed, was to make it something that the community could engage with and learn from. And I actually have already had a lot of engagement with the profile itself. I even had somebody comment under one of the posts, thanking me for sharing and essentially gaining information from it. And that just kind of goes to show how rewarding of an experience this is. And so I didn't go through all the captions right now, but I have also linked the archive to this presentation, and then a document with screenshots of all the captions and all the posts and everything. So more of what I kind of touched on is in there, but yeah, that was just to kind of give a brief overview. And then I just wanted to close out and say that highlight this quote by Margaret J. Wheatley, who was a pretty profound American writer. And she says that all social change begins with a conversation. And that's something that I really want to echo through this presentation. The reason why I chose to present my information through social media, through Instagram specifically, is because a lot of our younger generation picks up information through social media. And though it can be a scary place, it can also be a platform that's really impactful in terms of spreading information. And as Wheatley said, change does not start until things are actually being talked about. And so spreading awareness and information is something that is super helpful. And that was kind of my hope with this presentation. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the archive. It's both linked in this presentation, and you can also find it on Instagram with the handle that I linked right here. So thank you so much, and here's my We're Excited.